welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about how to memorize entire essays or how to memorize any long pieces of writing or information that you need to memorize, because as I talked about in my English note-taking video for Year 12 ATAR, I memorized two-page stories or two-page pieces of creative writing. So basically I memorized 4 pages of like size 12 font before my final ATAR exam, and so I'm going to talk about the techniques that I used to memorize all of that, because that's quite a lot to memorize. And memorization is unfortunately an important part of most subjects. Like, I know for English you obviously have to memorize things, for economics I had to memorize things, for chemistry, pretty much even maths I had to memorize like maths formulas and stuff. So yeah, but in this video I'm going to be talking about how to memorize anything, but particularly like long pieces of writing. I think these techniques are especially useful for. So for me, the key to memorizing things was to use all of my different, like, you know how there's those different types of learners, like you can be a learner who learns well from listening to things, or who sees things or does things. Like, there's all those different types of ways to learn things. I thought it was really good to utilize all of them to memorize your piece of writing, because if you are, for example, writing the passage and then reading it and then saying it out loud and listening to it, all of those things are going to work together in conjunction to help it stick in your brain more. Like if you hear it from different kind of angles, I guess, if you're learning and trying to memorize it from different angles, I think that helps you memorize it. I think that helps it stay in your mind better. So the first thing to do, if it's an English essay or something that you're writing, is to obviously you're going to have to write the piece of writing first. And this process is actually pretty important. So if you haven't, if you're trying to memorize a piece of writing that isn't written by you, it's actually harder, because the piece of writing I was trying to memorize were creative writing pieces, so there were stories that I had written, and so I'd gone through the whole process of writing them and trying to refine them and cut things out, so I already knew them pretty well. I already knew like kind of how the paragraphs went, because I'd gone through it and edited it myself so many times. So it does make it easier if you have written the piece yourself, but obviously all of the techniques in this video will help you memorize any piece of writing, whether it's your own or not. Okay, so once you've got the piece of writing, I think the first thing that I did was to read it heaps of times. I would just read it through until I was familiar with where things were in the piece and kind of what was in each paragraph. So that's the first step. Then what I do is I chunk it into chunks. So my creative writing pieces, I just chunked it into paragraphs. So each paragraph was, you know, the size of a paragraph, and there was probably about 6 or 7 paragraphs in each piece. Or no, was there like 9? There might have been 9. Yeah, I think there was more like 9. Anyway, so about like however many paragraphs are in each piece of writing, or if it doesn't have paragraphs, then just chunk it into like sensible sized chunks. And the first way I kind of went through and tried to memorize the piece was to write it out heaps. So what I would do was I would get a paragraph, get the first chunk, read it over a couple of times, and then I would go to a piece of paper and I'd try to write it out from memory without looking at it. And then I'd go back and read the paragraph again, see what I'd missed, and I'd fill in the missing words. So basically like a look, cover, write, check, but for every single paragraph in the piece, that's what I'd do. So writing it out is one kind of channel that you can use to memorize. Another channel to use to memorize the piece of writing is to record yourself saying it. So just like turn on, I used voice memos, the voice memos app that comes on the iPhone, and I just recorded myself saying the whole piece of writing, and it took like 5 minutes or something to say the whole thing, and then I would listen to that. I would listen to it when I was cooking, when I was driving on the way to school, if I was on the train, on the bus, just lying on my bed doing nothing. I would just put it on and listen to it, and most of the time when I was listening to it I tried to focus on what I was saying and focus on like the words and trying to get them in my head, but sometimes I just like had it on in the background and I wasn't completely focused on it. But I think even just hearing it, even if 100% of your focus isn't on it, just listening to it, it will start going into your subconscious and you're going to start being able to memorize it. So definitely recording yourself saying it and then listening to it, because then once you've recorded it once, you've got that wherever you are, so you can always listen to it, like if you're waiting for a doctor's appointment or just literally anywhere, you've got that tool on your phone and you can just listen to it. So I think that's a good way. So we've got writing, we've got listening. The next channel is to say it to yourself in your head. So for this one, you can also chunk it. So you can read the paragraph, like read it and then look away and try and repeat it to yourself in your head and see if you can remember it. And the same way with when you're writing it out, if you can't remember it all, then look back at the paragraph on the paper and kind of like, you know, get the words into your brain and then turn away and see if you can say it to yourself in your head again, or say it out loud. Saying it out loud is better, but I understand that like if you're studying at the library or if you're studying at home, you might feel a bit kind of self-conscious to say it out loud, so you can say it in your head. I actually did this once I'd got the piece pretty much memorized. I did this while I was running, so I'd be running along and I'd be thinking, like I'd be saying it to myself in my head as I went along, the whole piece of creative writing. So yeah, utilize any time that you have when your mind is kind of free to focus on something, and that happened when I was running. I did my long runs and I'd just go over and over those two pieces of writing in my head. And then because I was memorizing these pieces of writing for an exam, I would also say it out loud to myself on the way to school, on the way to the exam, or sometimes if it was I'd just say it on a random school day on the way to school, I would just recite my piece of writing as I was driving to school. But especially before every English exam, when driving to school, the drive to school is about 15 minutes, I would recite to myself both of those pieces of writing in the car on the way to school. I would say them out loud because I think speaking them it's better. It helps you memorize things better than just thinking of them, although you can think of them if someone else is in the car and you feel self-conscious. But I was just driving myself to school, so I said them out loud in the car on the way to school. And because I was driving to the exam and I was saying my pieces out loud on the way to the exam, that gave me the confidence that I had them memorized and that I would be able to write them in a few hours time in the exam. So those are the three biggest ways or channels that I would use to memorize things. That is to write it out heaps of times, to record yourself reading it and to listen to it heaps of times, and then to say it out loud to yourself heaps of times. And then now I just want to go back to chunking. I didn't really explain this properly, so get the at the start of using one of those channels of memorization, get the piece, chunk it into paragraphs like I said, and go through each paragraph. So say just take writing it out, for example, if we're using the writing channel. And by the way, I recommend you use all three channels because like I said, the more channels you can use to memorize something, the better it is. Like the better it will stay in your head because you're doing different things to help memorize it. And I don't know, scientifically that's like proven, I'm pretty sure. So anyway, use them all, but just taking the writing as an example. So you've got all your different paragraph chunks. Go and read one paragraph, then try and write it out and like fill in the gaps until you've got that paragraph pretty much down pat. Then go on to the next one, read through the paragraph, try and write it out. Go back, fill in the gaps, read through it again, write it out until you've pretty much got it. Then do the first two paragraphs together. So read through them and then try and write them both out, because you don't want to just do the first, then second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, because then by the time you've got to the last one, you'll probably have forgotten the first one. So you want to keep like regularly going back and writing the first one and then the second one, and then the first and the second and the third, and then the first four. And also the other important reason to do that is because then you learn what order the paragraphs go in, and you learn like how they join up, you know. So if you just memorize the paragraphs individually, you might accidentally miss out one because you're not used to putting them like writing them down in the right order. So I actually did that accidentally one time. I was just writing the paragraphs and I went paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, and I accidentally skipped 5 and went 6, 7, 8, 9. And it's not that I'd forgotten about what was in paragraph 5. I still had the paragraph 5 memorized in my head, but it was the fact that I hadn't practiced writing the whole essay out. So I just hadn't practiced like remembering that paragraph 5 existed, you know? So I just like, do you know what I mean? So it's important to practice writing like them out in the order that they're meant to be in, so that you remember to put them all in there and you remember in which order they go. So yeah, so once you've done paragraphs 1 and 2, then go on to paragraph 3, and then you could go on to paragraph 4, but then go back and do 3 and 4 together, and then do 1, 2, 3 and 4 all together, and do them a couple of times before you go on to the next ones, and go through like that until you get to paragraph 9 and do the paragraph 9 thing, and then try writing out the whole essay or the whole piece of writing. And once you're starting to write out the whole piece of writing and you're able to do that pretty well without looking at the notes, then you can then you've pretty much got it memorized. So then you just need to practice not looking at the piece of writing before you use one of the channels to memorize it. So that's the next thing to do once you've got it pretty much memorized. What you need to do is when you come to start your study session, don't look at the piece of writing and just try and write it straight away without reading it over first, or just try and say it straight away without reading it over first, because that's what you're going to have to do in your exam. You're not going to have read it right before you have to write it in the exam. Like, you're going to have had a bit of a break between the last time you read it and then when you're writing it in the exam. So you want to get to the stage that I was at in the end, where I would just come into my room to study English, and I would be studying some language features, studying some text structures. I'd do a practice comprehending, and then I'd be like, all right, now it's time to practice my composing, and I'd just write out that piece because I had it in my head now. I would just write it out and practice it, and I didn't need to read over the other piece, you know, before I did it. So that is the next important step. And once you can do that, then what you need to do is not lose your memorization. And the way you do this is, you've already gone through all of the hard work to memorize it. From now, it's pretty easy. You just have to every so often practice writing it. So at the start, this will be more and more often, and then as you get like further and further along, it'll be less and less often, and that's called spaced repetition. So once you have got it all memorized down pat, the next day you need to write it out without looking at the thing. And then the day after, you need to write it out or say it without looking at the thing. The thing being the piece of writing. So yeah, first and the second day, and then do that the day after as well. So do that for 3 days, and then have a day break. And then come back on the 5th day and try and write it out again. Writing it out is probably the channel that you should use most often, because you're going to have to write it in your exam, so you want to get used to being able to write it. And also you might want to know how long it takes you to write it, so you can like plan that time into your exam. Yeah, so on the 5th day, come back and try and write it without looking at the piece of writing after you've had a day's break. And if you can do that, that's good. Then wait 2 days and do it again on the 8th day. Then wait 3 days and do it again. And if you keep getting it right word for word every single time you come back to do it, then that's good. Just keep going, and you can do it less and less times, but probably make sure it's about once a week. If it's a short-term thing that you're trying to memorize it for, then you probably won't have really long. So just, I would say, keep it at once a week if you manage to get to that stage. I don't recommend doing it any less than once a week, because it literally only takes it only took me 45 minutes to write out one of them. So if you just memorize one kind of 2-page essay, it would only take you an hour to write it out. So an hour once a week isn't very much. I'm sure you can find that time to do it once a week, and then you want to just keep doing that. But if you find that you're starting to forget it, and when you go to try and write it like once a week without looking at the piece of writing, you're forgetting things, and you're having to like refer back to the piece of writing and see what you missed out, then you need to kind of like rein it back in and maybe practice doing the like other channels of learning it and memorizing it again, and try doing the chunking again with the bits that you're struggling with, and kind of like go back a couple of steps in the memorization process and try and iron out those mistakes and memorize it, and then start your spaced repetition again, because you don't want to, like I said, you've done all of the hard work to memorize this, you don't want to kind of lose it. So yeah, that's kind of the process that I went through to memorize those things for English. I am blessed naturally with a pretty good memory, so that does help. But if you work hard enough at trying to memorize something, you will be able to do it. Your mind is pretty powerful. There's a lot of storage space in your brain. It's just a matter of drawing the things that you've stored in your brain out. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope some of my advice has helped you. Like always, just pick and choose which parts of the advice you want to use. Not all of my advice will work for everyone, but I hope that something in this video maybe you can use or try out. So yeah, hopefully you liked it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel down below for more revision advice. I do heaps of revision, note-taking, studying, motivation, productivity, advice, especially for ATAR Year 11 and 12 students, because I've just finished last year. I graduated with an ATAR of 99.5, so I feel like I am fairly qualified to give kind of revision information. Yeah, so please subscribe to my channel if you want to see any more revision videos, and comment down below what revision videos you would like me to film. Nobody suggested this video, I just decided to film it because I thought it was interesting, and I think it's something that yeah, hopefully some people are looking for, and hopefully it helps them. So yes, okay, cool. I'll see you in my next video. So I just forgot what I was saying then. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say. All right, bye.